are still talking about our nation building series. And today, let me remind you that in every nation, there will be people that will ask you to worship them. Most of these people will ask you to worship them because their advisors worship them. And when their advisors worship them, they make them feel like they are gods. They start to have a level of delusion, and they start to have a level of ignorance about the plight of things. And if you go to the book of Daniel in the Bible, you will see that Daniel had such encounter with a king called King Darius. And if you read through Daniel from Daniel 6, 25, 27, you will see that Daniel had that encounter. Some people are going to deceive King Darius, and they told King Darius to pass a law that it is only King Darius that should be worshipped for the next 30 days. I mean, how come will a man pass a law that he should be worshipped? But are there not people that pass laws that they should be worshipped today? Are there not people that pass laws? For 30 days, he said everybody must worship him. And everybody must bow down to him. And people around him had also deceived him and told him that you are the king, so you are Lord above all. And be very weary of people that tell you are Lord above all, because you're nothing but a human being. And the day you realize it, I hope it's not too late for you. But there was one man in the thick of everything called Daniel that said, it is only the Lord God will I worship. And I will not bow down to anybody. And please, TikTok people, vote. If you want me to keep having you guys on, vote. Because we might not have you guys on soon. We might have to call off TikTok from this. And because we want to focus on where we have a lot of following. And we don't get a lot of on TikTok. So we're just asking you so you can vote. Do you want it on? Or we should leave you guys out and then you go watch from other platforms. Then David said, no, I am not going to succumb to King Darius. Daniel said, no, I'm not going to succumb to King Darius. And Daniel kept on worshiping the Lord God. And King Darius got upset. And King Darius said, we'll put Daniel in the lion's den. Because anytime you push for accountability and you push against people that torment others, the first place they are quick to push anybody is in the prison. Have you ever wondered why Henry Thoreau, Louis Thoreau said this? He said the best place for a sane mind in an insane society is the prison. So when people are put in the prison for their convictions, it shows they are doing something better. And a lot of people will be put in the prison for their convictions. Just like the British put Herbert Macaulay in the prison and lied against him. But till today, Herbert Macaulay is still recognized as Nigeria's founding father. Because the work he did with Lagos Daily Record and the Daily Service, which he co-founded, was what led Nigeria to the path of independence. But when Herbert Macaulay was fighting for the independence of this country, there were a lot of Nigerians that were siding with the British. So do not be dismayed when the same Nigerians were fighting for talk against us. I'm not surprised. It has always been. You know, there are some people, their stomach is more than their destiny. And for them, as long as their stomach is full, they can forget destiny. But for we understand destiny. And we understand that momentary hunger can never be directly proportional to destiny. But there are some people that can sell their destiny for a pot of asaro. So during the colonial period, there were a lot of people too that were fighting Herbert Macaulay, and they were siding with the British because their stomach was more important to them. But the question is, who remembers those people today? Today we still talk about the Wizard of Keston Hall, about Macaulay. Today we still talk about people like Herbert Macaulay and what they did. But who remembers those that fought Herbert Macaulay? Till today, if you want to learn more about Macaulay, about Herbert Macaulay, most of his libraries, the materials in his libraries, are in the University of Ibadan. In fact, there's something called the Macaulay Library. But those that went against him and they were supporting the British because they were collecting small things from the British, where are they today? So in every generation, as you see truth speakers, you will also see hungry jobbers. That for them, for money, they'll do anything. For power, for proximity to power, they'll do anything. But what they forget is that proximity to power is not power. And the true power in this world should belong to the people. So when King Darius kept Daniel in the lion's den, he thought that was the head of Daniel. But you all know the story. What did the lion do? Daniel came out triumphant because Daniel decided to hold on to his God. And Daniel decided that he will not be impetuous to understand that the God of King Darius is not his God. Because the God of King Darius cannot serve him. And the God of Darius is Mammon. But the God which we call on, the one who was and is to come, the Kiniweya Judah, the Agbanilagbatan, the Aroguyo, is only the one that will save him. So Daniel got to a point that even if King Darius slays him, he will die serving the one who was and is to come. So when King Darius and his cohort put Daniel in the lion's den, they forgot that the king's heart is in God's hands. So if the king's heart is in God's hands, the lion is nothing. The lion there in the lion's den that King Darius put Daniel symbolizes the forces of destruction. And when you speak truth to power, the forces of destruction will come at you. They will come to devour you. But as long as your conviction is strong and you know your God, you will come out on top. Can I get an amen? In the end, those that they sent to destroy Daniel, the lion that was sent to destroy Daniel cooperated with Daniel. So for everybody sent to destroy you, will cooperate with you to achieve your dream. That's why I tell people I don't have enemies. Because anybody that calls himself my enemy will potentially help me along the line. Because what I carry is on the path to destiny. And anybody that comes my way will play their parts. So they can play their parts as opposition today, but at some point necessary, they will play their part as long as the destiny of God is realized. So Daniel, that was in the lion's den, the lion that was sent to destroy Daniel became a part of Daniel's destiny. And that's why today, when we talk about the story of Daniel, we must talk about the lion to show the severity of the assault King Darius wanted to put against the life of Daniel. So for those that are sent to abuse and destroy you today, they are part of your destiny and they will work for you. I thank God for adversary, because the God of Daniel does not sleep. But you see, in every generation, a people must also wake up and hold those that hold them accountable. And when the tide turned, King Darius was the one that vindicated Daniel, and he brought Daniel out, and all of those that conspired against Daniel faced a brutal assault. So the question is, are you going to say because you face opposition, you will not hack into the word of destiny by ensuring that there is accountability in the society? The Yorubas will say, Agbedo. We must not do it. Because greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. And our destiny is not about ourselves. It's never about us. Our journey in life is never about us. In fact, we do not live our life for ourselves. We live our lives to the empowerment, to the inspiration, to the upliftment of others. And that's why we must demand accountability. The second story I'm going to tell you is the story of a king called King John in 1215. Anytime I'm abroad, if I have the chance, I like to go to a place called Runnymede in the UK. Because it was there a document called the Magna Carta was signed. Underline the word, the Magna Carta. Prior to 1215, King John was oppressing the barons. He was a king that felt other people were subject to him. King John was just like King Darius. He wanted everybody to serve him. In fact, he was oppressing the barons. And he did that to a particular extent that the barons said, no, we must hold King John accountable. Accountability. Ability to account. So the barons called King John and they sat him down in a place called Runnymede. And they forced King John to sign a document called the Magna Carta, or the Bill of Rights. The document had over 60 clauses. And what did they say? They said, you must be accountable to the barons. In fact, it's the bishop of the church, accountability, that's helped them negotiate the documents. The Magna Carta is the body of work that leads to the determination of the rights of people. Because if the Magna Carta was not signed, the barons will not be able to demand accountability. It is the Magna Carta not the Magna Carta, the Magna Carta. MANACARTA. 1215. Runnymede. The Magna Carta told the king that you are not the Lord of all. Because you are the king does not mean you own us all. The Magna Carta told the king you must be accountable to the laws of the land. The Magna Carta told the king you can't kill people just because you're a king. Every society functions on the Magna Carta. The Nigerian Constitution is written on the back of some of the laws of the Magna Carta. And that's why you have the freedom of association. You have freedoms. The Magna Carta also demands that the security of the people is the role of government. And that's part of our Constitution. So, the truth has to be said. Demanding accountability from our leaders is our own Magna Carta to them. But you see, when you demand this accountability, some of the leaders will do three things. They'll incarcerate you. They'll lock you up. They'll use people that are suffering like you against you to abuse you. They'll do propaganda against you. And they'll call you a thief. So be ready. Like I was saying, Albert Macaulay, they called Albert Macaulay a thief. In fact, they took him to court. They jailed him. They said he was a thief. It is what they call corruption fighting back. So we must be well aware. But are we going to say because people are going to abuse us, we shouldn't say it the way it is? No. Because your life depends on it. Because the money your leaders are spending are the commonwealth of Nigerians plus your taxes. The God-given wealth of Nigeria plus your taxes. So when you have the God-given wealth and your tax is also there, and people say you don't have a right to ask questions, plus loans in your name. Because do you know that Nigeria pays, and you as a Nigerian, you pay for every loan Nigeria takes? Ask me how. Can somebody ask me how across all the platforms? Can somebody ask me how this morning, how we pay for loans? You want to ask me? Ask me how. If you don't ask me how, I don't say it. Say, how do Nigerians pay for the loans our government takes? How? Very good. You pay for the loans your government take in inflation. Do you know that part of the inflation we are facing today was because of the ways and means taken by the former governments? And that has also been inflationary. So, the more we take loans, the more we become encumbered. The more we become encumbered, the more inflation increases. The more inflation increases, the more there's an economic downturn. And you pay. So apart from government using your money that they ought to use to build infrastructure, you also pay for loans through inflation. If you had 100,000 naira as at 2023, today your 100,000 naira cannot buy you anything because of inflation. In fact, somebody was telling me that as at 2021, when dollar was 400, 500, if they use 40,000 naira to go to the markets, they will buy a lot of things. But today that dollar is 1.5. The things 40,000 naira can buy then, 1.450, 1.470, let's say 1.5. The things 40,000 naira can buy there, over 100,000 naira cannot buy today again. So you are also paying for the bad economic decision of your leadership. And that's why you should hold your leaders accountable. So the question I'd like to ask you today is, what is stopping you from holding your leader accountable? Not one person will help you hold your leaders accountable. Can you hold them accountable? How will you hold them accountable? At first, you have local government chairman. How many times have you written to your local government chairman? You have representative. Every state has 3 in the Senate. Every state has people in the House of Reps. How many times have you written to them? And leaders too must provide their email address and how they can reach them. They must have a constituency office where the constituents come to lay complaints. See, in other parts of the world, when you have a problem, the first person you run to meet is your constituency representative. In Nigeria, they can hardly go meet you because you are not even available. You must have constituency staff. The millions you are getting should be also for your constituency staff. When you will put a computer there, they will be able to access mail. Your constituency, and you must have a constituency Facebook or email account where people can even access and send you messages. But as we speak today, do any of you do that? You can't keep leaving them to charge. As long as they are in charge of your commonwealth, they become your responsibility. Because let me tell you something. If you are abusing people that are demanding accountability for the pittance of 50 million, 100 million, whatever million they are giving you, you are a fool. Because before a politician will give you 50 or 60 million, he has stolen times 100 of that money. So in the end, you will never be as well to do as he is. So you need to start with accountability in your own local area. The phone lines to call 0907 651 1008. 0907 651 1008. So the question is, you need to start with accountability in your own local area. If you don't have the capacity to ask questions, then you will never build a viable society. The reason why society is suffering is because they see a docile citizenry. So it needs to start with you. Like the Magna Carta, you need to have a new Magna Carta by saying I will hold leaders accountable. Well, how are you doing?
Good morning, sir. This is Maxwell from 2 days.
Maxwell, God bless you.
Thank you very much. I thank the food. I'm taking like I thank so. That has been happening around that I don't know or would like to have been ignorant about.
Thank you.
Coming to this problem, the said local government you talked about, representative. You know, sometimes when you go to the council of the local government, they cannot go close that way because of the religion of talk, or the talk they use around them.
You see, that's why Nigeria is not moving forward.
Yes, sir. So in this case, you know, sometimes I ask, how do we meet these people? Because they know they're not doing the right thing. So when they see you come or they see you want to ask questions, what they use is their talks, their demonic talks. They use these talks to shake you away. So you want to do that to them.
So what you will do is that if their talks defend guarding you, write a public letter and send to me as regards what's happening in your locality. Today, as from today, if you write a public letter and tag me on Facebook, because Facebook allows long form writing, I will repost what is happening in your constituency. At the end of today, after this call to accountability,
If you want to be heard, say here on Voice of the People, 90.3 FM. 90.3 FM. From the views on the streets,
we go to bed empty hunger.
to the blaring horns of a hustling city. The loudest voices of the common man got a medium to be heard.
This particular administration, they were coming unprepared.
It's not a bad thing to renovate the president's lodge.
Through top-notch programming, unbiased reportage of news, sports, business, entertainment, and cultural documentaries, Voice of the People 90.3 FM became a symbol for 21st century media. And now, a new baby is born. Voice of the People Television, VOP TV, youthful, full of vigor and pressure for excellence in the continent's media space, exposing the wrongs, applauding the rights, dissecting the news without fear or favor, through factual and accurate stories and contents.
Corruption kills three things and makes a society.
Representing the interests of the people and giving them a voice. Voice of the People TV is here to stay towards building a fair society. VOP TV, Voice of the People Television, truly a voice for the people.
Broadcasting live from the Coco News Center, giving you the latest updates around the globe. This is
VOP 90.3 FM.
My guy, you better upgrade yourself and live in the city like a big boy. Even if you don't want to stay outside, YouTube is always there for you, you know.
I know, but no be every time person go dey open eye for YouTube, Instagram, Facebook because of update.
My guy, don't worry yourself. Tune to Voice of the People's Radio, VOP 90.3 FM. Listen to a radio station that keeps you up to date with the current news and talk shows, as well as business programs.
How to find good business ideas in Nigeria.
Listen and learn.
6 powerful strategies for discovering opportunities to make money in the Nigerian market.
Contribute and let's make a better society together.
I think it's the best for us in Nigeria. Actually, we are going to find it difficult for the first time, but in future we are going to gain it. If we can be able to be patient with it, is the best.
Voice of the People's Radio, VOP 90.3 FM.
Tune in every day.
From the views on the street,
we go to bed empty hunger,
to the blaring horns of a hustling city. The loudest voices of the common man got a medium to be heard.
This particular administration, they were coming unprepared.
It's not a bad thing to renovate the president's lodge.
Through top-notch programming, unbiased reportage of news, sports, business, entertainment, and cultural documentaries, Voice of the People 90.3 FM became a symbol for 21st century media. And now, a new baby is born. Voice of the People Television, VOP TV, youthful, full of vigor and pressure for excellence in the continent's media space.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. Local Guma Road, please. We won't allow about that. Also, that in your locality, please call me to tell me. That's accountability. We'll keep talking about it as much as possible. Do not let anybody shut your mouth because it's in their interests.
people that will lie behind you. The masses will stand behind you. The lady that has been calling me from Mexico, that said I have eye issue, that I need to do.
How far with your eye issue?
I have not done so. I have not. Okay, look at me. The government is good.
I can imagine.
I have been due for service in June. Because of money, I have not done it. It's of a contract. So they're supposed to do like that.
How much is this your surgery?
They said
I beg you. There's this woman here. She needs let's say 300,000 naira everything. All right, for her surgery. This is her number for eye surgery. She's been calling for months. 0916 193 5297. I beg all of us, let's crowdfund and just give that woman that 300,000 for one of her eye surgery. 193 5297 for her eye surgery. So let's gather together and help her. If the government is failing, we don't have health insurance, we don't have anything, let's gather together and help her. And that's why I run a foundation. With what I do, I give people help with the best I can do. But I can't do it all. I can't do it all. Let's just gather together and help. Because see, while we keep on holding government accountable, there are many things too we have to do for ourselves, because they will never be there to be able to help us. Because when you go to the hospital, in a country where over 80% of the primary healthcare centers are not in good shape, all right? I went to a village yesterday, where they were having a Puso day. It was the community that built themselves healthcare center and a school. Parts in Ogun State, Puso Remo. I was there with their Caribou of Remo Land of Puso, of Alabinjo. If you go and check because I also promote our children, so I go to cultural festival days and things like that. Cultural days. So let us support one another. I don't have her account number, but I will call her number. You can reach out to her. 0916 193 5297. That's the one with the eye. I know there are a lot of other people too that used to lie to collect money, but this woman has been calling for a while. So help her. I beg you. I beg you. Let me take the last call before I start to wrap things up. It's been a great sermon today, and I thank you all for your time. 07651 1008. 0907 1008. 1008. Somebody said I graduated in 2024 at my school. Right? So 097 651 1008. These are the phone lines to call us on. Okay, we'll take this as the last call. Hello? 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 Okay, this person is not speaking. We'll take this as the last call, and the show will continue on a couple of other platforms. VOP is carrying our show now. Very good. VOP on YouTube, VOP 90.3 FM on YouTube. Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Great to have you.
Yes, I want to contribute to your program this morning.
What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, my name is Tokumbo from Abuja.
Good to have you.
Yes, I just want to talk about the sites that were arrested. March 28th, they were doing a peaceful protest.
Okay.
The army killed over 26 of them. Their corpse is still with the I think maybe SARS or so. And the 18 women were among the 100 arrested. including the nursing mother with her baby. But the nursing mother was just released, I think, 3 weeks ago. But the 2 women, they are still there. There's video of them when they were celebrating Maulud Nabi in prison. So I don't know. Nobody is talking about them.
Okay, at least you've talked about it. That we're giving you a platform to talk about it. So you can't say nobody's talking about them because this is a global platform.
What I mean is that the press itself.
No, but we're. Thank you, man. We're giving you a platform. Good one. All right. Hit us up on the phone lines 0907 651 1008. 0907 651 1008. That's about all we'll be taking this one. Okay, we have the final caller. Hello, how are you? Oh, okay. That's about so much. So if you want us to give them TikTok, just let us know. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate each and every one of you. Bless you all. Thank you for your time. The show continues on VOP 90.3 on YouTube platform. And if you're in Lagos terrestrial, you can just tune into the radio dial 90.3 FM. Somebody say, my chairman, please, the governor of Enugu is doing well, but tax is too high. Okay. Governor of Enugu, pity people with taxation, no. Please, I hear the governor of Enugu is going to officially decamp on Tuesday to the APC. Politicians are decamping everywhere. Hello, how are you?
I'm fine.
What's your name?
My name is Austin.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Benin.
From Benin. Good to have you. You have a quick second to speak.
All right. So I just want to commend Rufai for the work you're doing in Nigeria.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless you. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So on that note, we'll wrap things up. God bless you. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for constantly joining us on our multiple platforms. Bless you all. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to see all of you here. Thank you for coming out and joining us this evening. I'm Les Adler, the Dean of the School of Extended Education, and it's my pleasure to welcome you, those of you who are regulars at Sonoma State and those of you from the community who've joined us this evening. This is a very special event, an evening with Dr. Molefi Kiti Asante. This is part of a major initiative here at Sonoma State University to enhance global and international education. It's a recognition on the part of the campus, and perhaps it's a long overdue one, that a big part of our mission here is to bring the world to our students, and wherever possible to bring our students out into the world and make a connection happen. The mission statement of a new global and international Studies Committee here on campus speaks of the vital need to advance the exchange of perspectives, skills, knowledge, and understanding between cultures. And I think that's the purpose of this evening's talk, and I think it will be a wonderful evening for all of us. Before turning the podium over to the person who will introduce our speaker and the speaker, I want to thank several people and acknowledge a number of people who've made this evening possible. First and foremost, I'd like to thank Miriam Hutchins. Miriam, where are you? At the back of the room. Miriam is the director of the North Bay International Studies. She's the same height when Miriam's the same height standing or sitting. Miriam is the director of the North Bay International Studies Project, which has been a leader in bringing international education to Sonoma State and through Sonoma State for many years. I also want to thank the Napa Valley Unified School District that has helped fund this event and make this evening possible. I would like to thank members, many of them are here this evening from the Global and International Education Committee, which is headed by Dr. Carol Blackshear-Belay, who are engaged in the process of enhancing global education in every way possible here at Sonoma State. I'd also like to acknowledge the existence and thank the support of Phi Beta Delta, which is a new international honors education society that has just opened a chapter here at Sonoma State. I would also like to thank the School of Education and its staff, in particular Joni Boucher, who's standing at the back, who has done another wonderful job in coordinating this evening's event. A couple other announcements, and then I will get out of the way here this evening. One is that after the lecture and a brief question and answer period, there is going to be a reception. There are refreshments. It will be held in the room next door. You're welcome to join us and stay as long as the refreshments last, which I hope is a long time. Otherwise, we have a lot of brownies we have to take back. Finally, please, you know the drill on cell phones, pagers, anything that rings. Please take time now and turn them off until the plane has landed and we've taxied up to the jetway. It is now my pleasure to introduce the Vice Provost of Academic Affairs here at Sonoma State University, Dr. Carol Blackshear-Belay, who's going to introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you very much.
Good evening. It is such an honor to have Dr. Molefi Kete-Asante here at Sonoma State University. Dr. Asante has been a friend of mine, a colleague of mine for over 20 years, and we've kept in contact all of this time. And for you to have the opportunity to hear Dr. Asante speak this evening, you will leave this evening with quite a bit to talk about. Dr. Molefi Kete-Asante is Professor, Department of African American Studies at Temple University. Considered by his peers to be one of the most distinguished contemporary scholars, Dr. Asante has published extensively in the field of African and African American studies, including his most recent publication of The History of Africa, The Quest for Eternal Harmony, Cheikh Anta Diop, An Intellectual Portrait, and The Handbook of Black Studies, co-edited with Dr. Maulana Karenga. In the 1990s, Black Issues in Higher Education recognized Dr. Asante as one of the most influential leaders in the decade. Dr. Asante completed his master's degree at Pepperdine and received his PhD from UCLA at the age of 26 and was appointed a full professor at the age of 30 at the State University of New York at Buffalo. At Temple University, he created the first PhD program in African American Studies in 1987. He has directed more than 130 PhD dissertations and has written more than 300 articles for journals and magazines, and is the founder of the theory of Afrocentricity. Dr. Asante was born in Valdosta, Georgia, of Nubian and Yoruba heritage. also one of 16 children. He is a poet, dramatist, and a painter. His work on African culture and philosophy has been cited by several journals, including the Journal of Black Studies, Journal of Communication, American Scholar, Didactylus, Western Journal of Black Studies, and Africological Perspectives. The Utne Reader called him one of the 100 leading thinkers in America, and Asante was recognized in a survey as one of the 25 influential African males of the last 200 years. In 2001, Transition magazine said, and I quote, "Dr. Asante may be the most important professor in Black America," end of quote. In 2002, Dr. Asante received the Distinguished Douglas Eninger Award for Rhetorical Scholarship from the National Communication Association. The African Union cited him as one of the 12 top scholars of African descent when it invited him to give one of the keynote addresses at the Conference of Intellectuals of Africa and the Diaspora in Dakar in 2004. Dr. Asante was inducted into the Literary Hall of Fame for Writers of African Descent at the Gwendolyn Brooks Center at Chicago State University in 2004 and is the recipient of more than 100 awards, including honorary professor, Xinjiang University in China. Dr. Asante is a prolific writer, speaker, and scholar, and we are so honored to welcome him to Sonoma State this evening. So now, without further ado, please welcome Dr. Molefi Asante. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, my pleasure. Yes, thank you so much. All right, be careful. Thank you. Thanks. I want to thank Dr. Blackshaw-Balai for her introduction. I want to also thank Dr. Adler for his remarks, and also share in thanking the North Bay International Studies Project, the School of Extended Education, the Global and International Education Committee, Phi Beta Delta, and the Napa Valley Unified School District for having me come and present here tonight on this important topic, important subject. Really delighted to be at Sonoma State, and I want to start by perhaps giving you an orientation to the general discussion that I will have with you. And let me start historically and sort of set a context, and then talk about the African Renaissance in terms of what's happening on the ground today as we sit here in Sonoma. In 1444, the first Portuguese ship came down the west coast of Africa and took 70 Africans back to Lisbon. And at that moment in history, we began what might be called the European participation in the diaspora of Africans. That is the scattering of Africans from the continent of Africa to other places. There had already been, of course, the scattering that was produced by the Arabs on the eastern side of Africa, and that had lasted for hundreds of years, and that produced also another diaspora of Africans in the eastern part of Africa, and also in Arabia and throughout the Indian Ocean. Earlier, there was another migration, which was a migration of Africans from the continent of Africa to various parts of the world. And of course, the last one was a prehistoric migration of Africans. I mean, the 6 billion people that we have in the world today are basically Africans in terms of the DNA. So we know if we take a monogenetic theory of human origin, that is, where human beings originated in one place, whether you take biology or whether you take archaeology, the argument is that all human beings originated on the continent of Africa. So we have two historic diasporas created, one by the Arabs, one by the Europeans. These diasporas also created other situations where you have enormous populations of Africans, for example, in South America and in North America, in the Caribbean, if you take just the American side, the Atlantic side. And if you look at that population, you will also discover that there are more black people who live in South America than who live in North America. Most of us don't know that, but there are more black people living in South America, in Brazil, in Ecuador, and Peru, actually every country down there with the exception perhaps of Bolivia and Paraguay and Chile, and a small population in Argentina, but not very large. But the rest of the countries, Venezuela, Colombia, Guyana, Suriname, Brazil. Brazil has the largest population of black people outside of Africa, perhaps, with the exception maybe of the Sidi population in India. But you have a huge population in Brazil of 70 to 75 million black people who live in that country. So you have also the population of Africans in the Caribbean, which is a large population in the Caribbean. Whether you take Cuba, or whether you take Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Bahamas, Barbados, Trinidad, etc., many African people living in those places. There's a population in Mexico. There's a population of Africans in Mexico, the Afro-Mexican population, which has been there a long time, actually from the 1600s. And then you have populations in Canada, in Nova Scotia. These were populations that have also been in Canada, in Ontario as well, been there for a long time. And what I am saying to you essentially is that the African diaspora, that is the scattering of Africans, is a scattering that has occurred throughout the Americas and is directly related to the prospects for the future of Africa itself. And I will explain what I mean by that in a minute. But let me just go to 1948 and give you the statement that this title comes from, the title of my presentation tonight. A young man who was 25 years old, who had been born in a town called K2. Actually, it wasn't a town, it really is a village. It's a village with no roads. You can't even get there by a road. You have to go across fields. I've been to this place. It's in Senegal. It's called K2. But normally when we talk about Sheikh Anta Diop, we say that he was from Jurbel. Jurbel you can get to by a road, but where he was really born you can't get to. So you really have to go across fields to get there. But he was born in K2, went to school in Jurbel, and then went to school in Saint Louis, which was at that time when he was growing up. He was born in 1923. When he was growing up, he went to the French school in Saint Louis, which was a capital, the French capital of French West Africa at that time. And after that, he was sent to Paris by his family to become educated in French culture, French education. And he was an excellent student, studied physics. But when he was 25 years old, by the time he had studied physics, got his first degree, and decided that he wanted to go into history, he wrote an article for a journal that was called Présence Africaine. And in this journal, at 25 years of age, this young African man asked the question, when shall we speak of an African Renaissance? This is a profound question that he asked, and it was a question that was necessary. In fact, it was a question that should have come earlier, but it was perhaps not in the cards because the colonization process, that is the European colonization of Africa, had essentially broken apart the traditional patterns of African life and culture, and so people were not thinking of that. People were thinking of how do I become a better French person, a better English person if they had been colonized by the English or Belgians, and so forth and so on. In 1884 and 85, these are good dates to remember. In November of 1884, there was a big conference that was held in Berlin, Germany, and it was under the direction of Wilhelm von Bismarck at the request of his friend, King Leopold of Belgium. He said, let's have a conference and let's decide something about Africa. This is 1884, all right? Now, in 1884 and 85, a couple of things had already happened, things that historically we can look back and perhaps say, oh, well, maybe the 1884 conference is coming because the things that have already happened simply predicted almost logically that it should happen. For example, you recall this, or if you know a little bit about American history, we know this. In 1865, there was the end of the slavery in America. That is, the Civil War ended in 1865 in this country. And we also know that before that time, in 1807, this was the year, the date at which there should be the end of slavery on the high seas. In other words, by that time, the Constitution of the United States had said it. Because the Constitution was ratified in my city, where I'm from, Philadelphia, in 1787. They said, okay, 20 years from now, there should be no more Africans brought across the ocean to the Americas. No more. Cannot happen anymore after 20 years. So 1807 is supposed to end. The British Parliament also said, no more. We're not doing this anymore. Now, you can still have slavery in these countries, in the Americas, but you can't bring Africans. You can't import Africans from Africa into the Americas anymore. And so that was supposed to be the end. Of course, it did not. We know it did not end. There were many slave ships that still came into the Americas. In fact, the last slave ship that came to the United States came in 1859, to show you how people, didn't really recognize the 1807 date. But the 1807 date was important because psychologically what it said was, okay, no longer would nations be able to profit from the slave trade. This was what was agreed upon. But now, for 300 years, nations had been profiting. Almost 400 years in some cases, nations had been profiting from the slave trade. What do you do to replace the profit from the slave trade now that you no longer have it? What can nations do? And the European economy, to a large degree, its industrialization had been fueled by the slave trade. It brought much money into the economies of Europe. So what do you do? How do you deal with this issue? That's where the Conference of 1884 is important. Because the Conference of 1884, in November of 1884, it lasted to February of 1885, that conference was a conference of 14 nations. Two of them, Turkey and the United States, were basically observers, basically 12 nations, to come together and to decide what they were going to do with Africa. This is very critical because Otherwise, we don't understand why the Renaissance is necessary, or what the prospects and the challenges are for the Renaissance of Africa, or for the diaspora of Africa, that is, the Africans who are not on the continent. This conference was basically provoked by King Leopold, because King Leopold had asked Henry Stanley. This was the man who was famous for the New York newspaper, I think the Mirror, sending him to Africa to find David Livingstone. And you remember the quote, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. That was made by Henry Stanley. So Stanley had a big reputation because he had gone to Africa, he traveled throughout the continent, he had discovered David Livingstone, he became a superstar. He was a celebrity in the 19th century. And as a celebrity, King Leopold asked him if he would undertake a mission for him, not for Belgium, but for the king personally. And that is, the king says, I want my own colony. Not for my country, for me. I want my colony. I'll pay you my personal money if you can give me a colony in Africa. And so Stanley said, I can give you a colony. I just need to, hire 7,000 troops, soldiers, and get some money from you, and I'll go there and I'll carve out an empire for you. And of course, basically that's what he did in a very ruthless way. Professor over at Berkeley, Adam Hochschild, has written a very important book called King Leopold's Ghost. If you get a chance, get that book. It's a very critical book on this issue, King Leopold's Ghost. But at any rate, when Stanley had completed his mission of basically subduing the Congo for King Leopold, Leopold never went to Africa. He never set foot on the continent, but he owned basically a colony that was 100 times the size of Belgium. And he had never seen it, but he got the profit from it. So he basically forced Bismarck, because Bismarck, of course, was the major leader of Europe at this time, forced him to have this conference so we can decide, all of us European nations can decide what belongs to Germany, what belongs to France, what belongs to Britain, what belongs to Holland, what belongs to Spain, what belongs to Portugal, and so forth. And so when they called the meeting, they had in front of them, actually in the middle of them, they were sitting in the round, they had before them a huge physical map of Africa. And when Leopold saw it, he referred to it as this magnificent African cake. That our job is to decide among us, Europeans, what part each of us would want. Now, there were no Africans at this conference, not one. No African president, no African kings, no African queens, no African representatives of governments, neither the two independent African countries, Ethiopia or Liberia, they were not there. Nobody was there. This was European business. And they took a long time to make this decision. And as they looked at the map, they began to divide it. So, if the Germans wanted the mountain called Kilimanjaro for their colony, their East African colony, then the British said, well, give us Mount Kenya. You can't take both of the mountains. You take one, we take one. And they drew lines all over the map. And ultimately, what they had was essentially the Africa that we see on the map today. I mean, there are some slight changes, but for the most part, I mean, the changes have been in name only. What was northern and southern Rhodesia becomes Zambia and Zimbabwe, for example. But essentially, the lines drawn were lines that had been created by these nations, and the French got the largest share. They got 36% of the whole continent of Africa belonged to the French, and about 32% of it belonged to the British. Now, how did they do this? I mean, what was the basic doctrine that allowed them to create this particular arrangement? There were three doctrines that came out of the Berlin Conference. The first doctrine, I call it in my book, The History of Africa, I call it the first one, the sphere of influence. The sphere of influence. That is, what they said was something like this. If you have any proof that you have any influence in a particular region of Africa, then that belongs to you. If, of course, there is a challenge from another European nation about that, then we have to have a second doctrine. This is the doctrine of effective occupation. For example, if you say, if you are Portugal, that you have an interest in the area that now is called Ghana, but at one time was called the Gold Coast. You say, we have an interest in this region because it is under our sphere of influence, because in 1482 we sent a mission there to trade with the local kings. Then the British could say, well, but no, we effectively control that area. We have a fortress there. Not only do we have a fortress there, we control the trade, and the Portuguese don't control anything there now. So basically that belongs to us. So basically that's what they did. There was a lot of bargaining going on, haggling actually, about who owned what and who had what influence. So these were the first two doctrines. The doctrine of the sphere of influence. If you had some influence on a particular part of Africa, then that we would agree that that's yours. If you have effective occupation of the territory, then obviously that's yours. Then the third one was, if you have had any agents in the territory, even though it is not occupied by you, even though there's no real sphere of influence, but you have had a missionary to go in, you have had an explorer to go in, you've had a merchant to go in at one time or the other, then you can also claim that you have a legitimate interest in that particular part of Africa. And if you have a legitimate interest in that particular part of Africa, then you can make a claim to say, okay, that belongs to you. Now, they did this, and when they finished, they had about 53 nations, well, actually, they didn't have 53 nations. They had territories, and these territories were then divided into nations, and then you had about 53 nations on the continent of Africa. Now, many people still think of Africa as one country, and when people say, I'm from Africa, they don't realize that you're really talking about 53, and actually in some senses, 54 nations in Africa. And each of these nations are different. But not only are you talking about 54 nations, you're talking about 18 different ethnic groups, 1,800 different ethnic groups. So you got 1,800 different ethnic groups, and you got 54 nations. You have tremendous diversity. But when the Europeans met in Berlin, they were not concerned about the ethnic diversity. So what you had, sometimes people who were Yoruba, for example, would live in two different countries under the Europeans, because the lines that were drawn in Berlin actually split up ethnic groups, because Europeans didn't much care about that. I mean, their idea was, you know, this was the area that we have the sphere of influence in, and our effective occupation, we want this part. And then if another country wants that part, then the same ethnic group is divided. People cannot visit their relatives anymore. You know, the routes that they would take freely are no longer free because they're actually crossing borders. You're going from French-controlled territory to English-controlled territory, and you've got to have the proper papers. And so, in fact, many problems were created by virtue of this. Now, this pattern had been a pattern that had been created earlier during the slave trade, because during the slave trade, when it initially started, Europe had to decide, how do we continue this process of going into Africa, bringing Africans out of Africa, and then enslaving them in the Americas without fighting with each other? Because initially, they fought with each other. I mean, this is what happened to the Portuguese, actually, in Ghana, in the Gold Coast. The Portuguese are there first, and they're trading, and then they get into the business of bringing Africans out of the region, and then the Dutch are looking at this very enviously, and then the Dutch decide that they will come in, and they will fight the Portuguese to take control of this rich area. And they did, and they defeated the Portuguese, and the Dutch took over, and then later on the British took over from them. So then they had to come to some agreement. How do we all trade in Africa for Africans and not fight Europeans? And they created something called the Asiento. The Asiento was that each nation or each shipping company that wanted to get involved in the slave trade had to first get permission from the Catholic Church and the King of Spain. You had to have an authority to go into a particular region, a particular latitude or longitude in Africa to bring out Africans. This was called the Asiento. The Asiento, A-S-I-E-N-T-O. Now the Asiento, if you were in a particular area and you were trading and bringing out Africans, and another European nation with their ships came in there and said, no, we want to do business in this area, all you had to do is show them Asiento. No, we have our Asiento. You have to go get your Asiento to get another area because this is our area. That prevented battles. It presented wars between Europe. The 1884 and 85 conference was essentially the same kind of thing. Since slavery is gone, how now do we control the resources of the continent of Africa? And that's why they went to this Berlin conference. I had to give you this background because to tell you now about what the Renaissance is about, you can see it, I hopefully clearer. The Renaissance now comes on the heel of a couple of things. In 1957, there is the independence of the country of Ghana. You can probably tell I have a Ghanaian name. Asante is a Ghanaian name. It's a country, of course, that's very close to many African Americans because of Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first president, went to school here. And not only did he go to school, but he was a mentee of W.B. Du Bois, the greatest African American intellectual. So everybody, I mean, many African Americans go to Ghana in all kinds of capacities. I mean, I'm installed as a king in Ghana, largely because, again, of the road that was traveled by Kwame Nkrumah when he was a student and when he went back, and also his relationship with Nkrumah, with Du Bois. But that was 1957. This year we celebrate the Jubilee of that. Actually, 4 days ago, or 5 days ago, the celebration, March 7th, of the independence of Ghana, because the independence of Ghana was the first attempt, actually the second, it was really the second attempt. The first one to break away was Egypt in 52. And then in 57 you had Ghana to break out from the colonial power and colonial authority. Now, these two countries breaking out from the colonial administration that had been set up at Berlin, this was actually revolutionary. I mean, it was like, wow. I mean, they could actually fight against the colonial powers of Europe and win. And you remember, you got 54 countries. Only 2 of them are independent, Liberia and Ethiopia. All the rest, from Algeria to South Africa, are basically in some form or the other of European control. And so the independence of Egypt, the independence of Ghana, these were very transforming events in the life of Africa. But because of the way it was structured, each country had to gain its independence individually. And that was a hard thing. Because when they fought internally to gain their independence, it wasn't like when Senegal got its independence, the rest of Africa was independent. Or when Algeria fought to get its independence, the rest of Africa was independent. In fact, when Ghana got its independence, Kwame Nkrumah said, and he said this on the night of the independence, the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked to the total liberation of the African continent. But of course, you can say that, but those people in Nigeria are still not free. The people in Kenya are still not free. And so each country had to go through its own birth, own development. What this did was to create a situation in which African nations depended on their own internal energies to create nationhood. Nationhood. They fought for nationhood. But they fought for nationhood. This is my assessment. They fought for nationhood along the wrong lines. They fought for nationhood along the lines of the created nation states that had been outlined by the Europeans. That is Africa's Achilles heel. Now, what is a Renaissance, and how shall we speak of the Renaissance of Africa? Here's how it's being done. In 2002, the Organization of African Unity, which came into birth very soon after the independence of Ghana. This was an organization made up of those few states initially that were independent. Kwame Nkrumah and Nasser, the president of Egypt, Haile Selassie, the emperor of Ethiopia at the time, they got together and they created this Organization of African Unity. But the Organization of African Unity was an idea that had no teeth and no power, and it was just a dream, and it was nothing more. It could do nothing. It had, they would meet once a year, basically. That was what they could do. There was nothing strong in it. It went out of it was created, I think, in 1963. It went out of business in 2002. And another organization was created, which was called the African Union. The African Union was created with one purpose in mind, to create the United States of Africa. Now, this is different. This is where we are now. This is the beginning of the Renaissance. I am a consultant to the African Union. I'm on the scientific committee of the African Union, and I also work with the Senegalese president in this regard. That is, the creation of an African Federated Union. And this is already being done. I mean, it's not even being talked about. The idea of Pan-African Union, which was an idea that Nasser believed in and an idea that Nkrumah believed in, that idea is already working on the ground. Initially, what Africans did was to create regional organizations, like ECOWAS, which is an organization of West African states, SADC, which is an organization of Southern African states, an East African organization, a North African organization, and a Central African organization. Now, those organizations are being translated into the backbone of what is going to be the United States of Africa. The proposal is already on the table. There was a meeting of 6 presidents, a subcommittee of 6 presidents about a year ago in Abuja, Nigeria, that I attended, in which they have already outlined this idea. First of all, first thing, a common passport, so that Africans will have one passport. It won't say Kenya, won't say Nigeria, say Africa. Your country is Africa. One currency, the Afro, which would be used all over the continent of Africa. They're already moving on these things. There would be one military command. There would be one foreign policy, not 54 different foreign policies, one foreign policy. There would be one economic policy, one general educational system, and also you would have common tariffs, so that you would not have people trading between different countries with different tariff rates and so forth. These are things that are already happening, and they're working on these things on the ground as we speak. The foreign ministers of these 54 countries are hard at work trying to figure it out. In July of this year, at the Accra Conference of the Heads of State of Africa, they will begin the process of putting this not only to the public test, but they will also be trying to set up legislation that will allow different countries to begin the process of having referenda in countries to decide if they want to move ahead with this. This is a very beautiful prospect. If Africa were to become a federative state, the United States of Africa, it would be the largest country in the world. It will have 12 million square miles. It would be larger than Russia, which is now the largest country in the world. It would be the 3rd largest country in the world in terms of population, with 1 billion people. It will also be a huge market and will create the possibility for Africans moving from Casablanca to Johannesburg, from Nairobi to Lagos, to Addis Ababa, without problems, without border problems. In fact, quite frankly, as I have seen it over the last 5 or 6 years, the masses of African people have already destroyed in their minds the original ideas that were created by the Europeans in 1884 when they created the boundaries and the borders of what is what, because people are walking across these boundaries as if they don't exist anyway. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are on the move in Africa every day, and they don't care about the borders. So if I want to go to South Africa, I go. If I live in Zimbabwe, if I want to go to Zambia, I go. I mean, there's no problem here. They say you don't have a passport or you don't have a visa. No, I go. I mean, it's Africa. So the masses of people, by their feet, are already voting for the idea of a single Africa. So this is an idea that is, as I said, that is coming. It's already in place in many parts of Africa itself. Now, what are the problems? There are many challenges. The first challenge that I think is the challenge of language, because people say, well, which language? But they've tried to resolve this. It said, right now we probably have to go with maybe even 4 languages in Africa. One African language, which would probably be Kiswahili, Arabic, English, and French, because otherwise you cannot operate on the continent. But those four languages would be considered official languages of the country. So that's one of the issues. The other one, of course, is this idea of sovereignty, that some states feel a deeper relationship to their own sovereignty than other states. The president of Senegal, Abdoulaye Wade, who is probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, just made a statement a couple of years ago, which I still like, and I appreciate it so much. He said, if we could bring this about today, this United States of Africa, I would gladly serve as governor of Senegal. And this was backed up by Colonel Gaddafi, who said the same thing about Libya, that if we could bring this into being, I would gladly serve under a president of the whole of Africa and simply be like a governor for Libya. They're probably the two most progressive leaders in Africa on this, Gaddafi and Wade. Mbeki is also progressive on it. Obasanjo of Nigeria is progressive on it, but he's leaving office. There are people who are not for it wholeheartedly. I mean, there are certainly Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia has problems with the idea. And I think he has problems with the idea largely because of the unique historical relationship of Ethiopia to its own particularity as a country that has a 4,000-year history. And I think that there's a very great fear of giving this up to become a part of Africa and just be called Africa with a region in Africa called Ethiopia. I think that's a big issue with him. I heard him voice this type of concern. But these are the issues. There's one other issue that has come up, and that is some people say, well, if we become the United States of Africa, we will then have to lose all these votes that we have in the United Nations. And my answer to that last year in my own statement to them was that you have all these votes, but they don't amount to very much. In fact, they don't amount to very much because almost any Western or European nation could simply manipulate almost any of these African countries because they're so small. Take, for example, Chad. You probably don't know very much about Chad or haven't heard very much about Chad. But I'll tell you, right now, the United States is actively involved in Chad. Not only actively involved in Chad, training the military in Chad, but it is building bases in Chad. And not only is it building bases in Chad, it is providing Chad with money for oil exploration. So the U.S. is deeply involved in Chad. Right now, it can manipulate Chad any minute. All Bush has to say is, do you want our money? Then this is what you do, because Chad is a very poor country. Right now it is, but it is potentially very wealthy because of its oil reserves. That's what we don't know. So one powerful Africa with one vote in the Security Council is worth more than the 54 votes of African nations in the UN without power. So what we're talking about here is how Africa can position itself for that final push for its renaissance. I'm going to make a couple of more statements, and then I'll just open it up for questions. This is a process. The Renaissance will not be complete when you have a United States of Africa. That's not, I mean, it's a political issue and it's a political solution. But the politics is only one part of it. The other one is a mental liberation. People's minds have to be liberated. And if the minds are not liberated, then you cannot have any other liberation. This is where the diaspora comes into play. A part of the African Union's plan under its NEPAD program, the new partnership program, is to have a new partnership with the African diaspora in the Americas. And that is to link Africa now with people in Jamaica, in Cuba, in the United States, in Brazil, in Venezuela, in Colombia, and so on. And that has it took off last year. In the first level, when President Lula of Brazil and President Wade made an agreement, the first agreement to have a direct flight from Dakar in Senegal to Fortaleza in Brazil. This is the first time. You can cross the ocean in 4 hours. From Dakar, Senegal to Fortaleza, Brazil is only 4 hours across the Atlantic. They did that last year. You have a regular flight between. This had not happened before. It seems like it would have been natural. But before, the idea was not to integrate Africa with the diaspora. Now the idea is to integrate. But at the same time, under the leadership of two African American secretaries of state, Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, I think the U.S. has become the greatest military force in Africa. And this is unfortunate in my judgment. What has happened in Africa under these two black secretaries of state is that they have moved into Africa to create about 10 military bases in Africa. And basically, they have just, you may have read this last week, they just created what they call a new African command. They call it what, AFRICOM. AFRICOM is the United States Military Command for Africa. And this is the first time they had a command for Africa, because now they got these military bases in Africa, and the idea behind this is to position the U.S. military to be able to move quickly into Angola, where there is oil, into Nigeria, where there is oil, into Gabon, where there is oil, and to protect what they consider to be, what at least the military or the Bush government considers to be, America's interest in the oil resources of Africa, in case they run into difficulty with the oil resources in Arabia. This is the way they are structuring that. Kwame Nkrumah would say, in all of this, that what we have to do in terms of this Renaissance then, in an African sense, is to work with education so that people will understand not only themselves in a context of their own ethnicities, but in the context of themselves as Africans. If we do that, and then we also have the possibility of dual citizenships with Africans who have been removed from the continent for hundreds of years, then it is possible that we can lead to a new revolution in the African continent. Forward ever, backwards never. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Asante will be happy to answer questions, probably about 10-15 minutes. And somebody out there has microphones, if anybody needs it, to ask brilliant questions or not so brilliant questions. But there's somebody up here.
So this idea of the Renaissance, I agree with you in the aspect of that the countries who have the equality of the idea of sovereignty, something that they've had to, in the last 50 years or so, most of the countries have become independent and have had to fight a lot of, colonization. And to this day, we still kind of have the idea of neo-colonization. They haven't, their previous powers haven't really left completely their nation. So in that aspect, I agree, but kind of wouldn't, before this idea of Renaissance become more an idea that really would happen, wouldn't you have to solve more internally each individual nation's issues, as in like Mozambique currently is having a lot of issues with
Thank you. It's a good question, and it's a very important question. Did everybody hear? Yeah. The answer to that is this: you can never wait until every country is actually where it thinks it ought to be. And the case that you gave, for example, the Mozambique, or if you give the case of Darfur or any of these cases, I always think of Louisiana and Katrina. In the case of Louisiana and Katrina, I mean, people could say, well, Louisiana better get its act together first. They're having incredible problems down there before we can decide whether or not they're going to be anything. But if you had one nation, then the people in Mozambique who were experiencing problems with floods, you could just take them to Zimbabwe. You could take them just like we did the people in Louisiana. We just say, okay, you got problems in New Orleans, come to Seattle. Same country. But if, of course, Louisiana is itself a nation by itself, and it has to deal with its problems by itself, it's overwhelming. It's almost impossible. It's a country that could never exist by itself. I mean, it's just like, I think at one time, if you had considered Nevada, maybe it's not true now, maybe because of Las Vegas and Reno, but if you had at one time considered Nevada a country alone by itself, it would not have been viable. It's basically desert. But this is the way I think about countries like Chad, Niger, Mali, Libya, Senegal, getting more and more into Senegal, but Senegal has much more fertile land in the south. But there's some countries that basically they have to be connected to other countries in order to be viable. And I think that the United States is a good example, good model for that. That because you guys live in a pretty rich state, California. I could live in Louisiana and say I'm still a part of the United States because the people in California are doing pretty good. You see, so that's the way I would feel. In Africa is the same way. People would say, okay, my home is in Ouagadougou, in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou. And yeah, it's basically dry and hot and desert here, but when we go on vacation, we go to the beach in Durban, South Africa, or we go to the beach in Abidjan or somewhere, Okay, I'm sorry, yes.
I was just going to ask you to apply that, because you're saying that there are areas like in America where you have that 30-degree of latitude and it's a desert, and there's not going to be much that's going to grow there anyway. But there are people and civilizations that have been there for so long. Are you implying that to make it work, they have to be moved? They have to be displaced?
That's a good point. No, they don't have to be. They don't have to be moved, but they do have the possibility of moving on their own if they want to move. For example, there is in Mali many, and in southern Libya and Algeria, many African people who live in the desert, and they're accustomed to living in the desert. But one problem even the desert dwellers have is that in the past, before 1884 and 85, you could go from Algeria to Libya with no problem. But because now there are these definite borders, you find border guards. You can't, well, they can get around them, but you can't go from one country to another like people did in the old times. So I think, again, even the people who want to live the pastoral life, they can live that pastoral life better in a United States of Africa where they have much wider territory than they have now. You see? Yes.
I found that your comment on conference that you had was really interesting. It seems like there's a cycle of recidivism as far as a group of people deciding on somebody else's destiny. And I'm just wondering, why does this always happen? Why is it a group of people thinking that they know better for somebody else than the people who live in
question, and I must tell you this is a real live fact. A few years ago, when I was invited to speak at the University of Manchester in England, when the guy met me at the airport, the professor met me at the airport to take me to the university, I was joking, but I said to him, this is the first time I'm in Manchester, and I'm of African descent, and I'm going to call Manchester the new Kumasi. From now on, it would be the new Kumasi. And the guy looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, it was a joke, but what I was basically doing was basically what Idi Amin did with the Scottish. People don't know. Do you know why that movie is called Last King of Scotland? Anybody know that? Why?
Well, because he had this attraction to Scotland and dressed up in the costumes.
Well,
The Scottish had been part of the colonization.
Okay. This is very interesting because you know why it was his official title. His official title. He named him. He was the president of Uganda and the King of Scotland. And he did it officially because, and what he did it was to mock what the Europeans did when they came to Uganda. They said this belonged to Queen whoever. This is the territory of Queen Victoria. Whatever. So he says, "Oh, you guys can do that? I can do that too." So basically, well, you think you're the Queen of Uganda? I'm the King of Scotland. And it was a part of his title. If you look at, because I wondered about that, and I looked and I read his life story, and he had a number of orders and titles that he gave himself, and one of them was the King of Scotland. So I said, that's where they got that from. He was the king. So what he was doing was basically that same kind of thing. But yeah, you do have people sometimes who take that authority and say, okay, we can do this. And they can do it without the people. But of course, people always revolt in those situations when they discover that, hey, wait a minute, you've taken over our land. Who gave you the right to do that? And then you have resistance, and you will have this resistance until that comes away, you see. Okay? Yes.
I spent a little bit of time in East Africa volunteering, and so I'm thinking about the practical application to like people I know on the shores of Lake Victoria who earn less than $1 a day, and I'm wondering who's going to pay for the infrastructure of the U.S., the United States of Africa, when people in Kenya, for instance, when the infrastructure barely exists there now, and where's the money going to come from that pays for
These
people going to meetings, even?
Yes.
And an economy that cannot, it's not functioning.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, they're working on that too. That's a good question because you're going to have a legislature that's probably going to be 1,000 people, much like the Chinese legislature or something. People come from all these different places, and you probably, if you're going to have a referendum on an issue, you're going to have a whole lot of money to have votes and so forth. But one thing to remember is this, that right now, if you take the 54 countries of Africa and you count up the number of people under arms, that is military, it is the largest army in the world. If you take the 53, put them together, it'd be the largest military in the world. So you don't need all those people under arms, number one. You don't need to put all that money in the military. Some countries have militaries, they don't even need them. So I think there's going to be some cost cutting. There's going to be also some restructuring. There's duplication, a lot of duplication. There's some countries that have airlines that do not need airline companies. So there are many ways that they're going to have to save, but it's going to be a big problem. I mean, it's obviously, when you start talking about money, it's a major problem. But you also are talking about the richest continent on the face of the earth in terms of natural resources. So what they've got to do is to manage the resources better, to exploit them better for the interests of the people, and to create a good, effective government. And I think that this is something that will help bring about the Renaissance. There are people who are, real good, solid, strong people who are willing to do this and who are trying to do it in all kinds of ways. There are projects that have to be developed, like in transportation and so forth. Gaddafi, for example, demonstrated that it was no problem to drive from Libya, from Tripoli to Accra in Ghana, overland by bringing 300 automobiles across the desert. From making his tour of Ghana was by automobile. He just said, okay, we're going to just drive. To get people used to the idea that you can move in the continent, and you have to be able to do these kinds of things. So I think that certainly with the management of many of the resources, they will be able to do it. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. There was a question in the back too.
Yeah, there's already been a lot of exploitation of the natural resources in Africa by people from outside Africa. Do corporations fear what might happen with nationalization?
Yes. This is a very good question. There are two fears. There are the corporation fears, and there are the state fears. The corporation fears are really they're similar to the state fears. The state fears, particularly the previous colonial states, and also China, which is now a big player in Africa. Their fears are that if you have a United States of Africa, you now have one general policy. Right now, you're able to exploit different nations at different rates and levels because you can play one against the other. That will not be the case. Corporations have rushed into Africa since 2002 to try to create bilateral agreements between one nation and the corporation, or China has been doing this recently, creating contracts between nations in a bilateral way. This is one of the challenges of the United States of Africa, because this complicates problems when you already have contractual agreements with foreign powers. How are they going to be handled by the new country? It's a big problem. Yes, it is. And the corporations are doing the same thing. There are many people who are saying, look, we can help you with the gold mines, the diamond, we can help you exploit the uranium, and let's make this 20-year agreement. And for 20 years, then what do you do when you have now a new state authority that says, look, we don't recognize that agreement? International law, international court would probably say you have to recognize it. So we're very concerned about that, because we see it happening over and over again. And the United States is involved in it as well. Whole idea, let's sort of like rush in and make as many agreements with these African states as they now exist, so that if there is ever a United States of Africa, it will have to deal with all these problems, you see. Okay. Someone want to direct this? Okay, I don't know, because there are several. You choose.
Okay, let's just take a couple more. All right, go ahead.
Dr. Oseni, you're from Philadelphia, and the prosecutor of Philadelphia, 27 years ago, placed Omid Abdul-Jamal onto death row, and he was rewarded because today Ed Rendell is the governor of Pennsylvania. The power to change these things, I believe, was given to us by Martin Luther King when he overwhelmed the system. He did not engage the system, he went around it. And I believe today, this patriarchal control of corporations and the media is now denying us information of the most powerful general strike led by women in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I believe that if we were to join with them in solidarity, it would be enough power to shut down the greed from California to the White House for for as long as we need to attain the control which could be then run by students, which would not be beholden to any corporate interests.
Thank you.
Would you agree with
I
that?
agree with that. Thank you. I think it's a good point. Absolutely. And I think we should have solidarity. In the Mumia case, we have all demonstrated in Philadelphia, of course, on this. This is an ongoing issue. Okay, yes?
I know that you mentioned that the legislature for the United States of Africa probably never over 1,000 years.
Yeah, I'm just, threw that out.
But what would the governmental structure look like, and how would that be implemented, and what time frame in terms of the government being there?
Well, here's what they have said. They've said, first of all, it has to happen within the next 20 years. If it doesn't happen within the next 20 years, there will be, the resources of Africa will really be squandered in terms of in terms of the solidarity of the continent, because there are very aggressive interests in Africa right now, very aggressive interests. I think the government will probably be a Republican type of democracy. I mean, I don't think that right now, I don't see it. I don't see it as any kind of a parliamentarian system. I think basically they're looking at a presidential system and that kind of thing. I don't mean Republican in terms of American politics, by the way. Please don't get me. don't mean that. But in terms of the state structure is what I'm talking about. And they are, there are many patterns. There are some people who are making an argument that it should be based on traditional African patterns of governance, which is also one useful thing to think about, to at least put in the hopper. I mean, I always say that I don't know anybody who would march into the capital of the Asante Kingdom in Kumasi, Ghana, and have a coup d'etat. It would not happen. They will march into Accra, Ghana, where the modern state capital is, and have a coup d'etat, but not with a traditional leader. And the reason probably is because there's more legitimacy with a traditional leader. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the system will be, but there is a young man named Tidiane Gadio, who's a foreign minister of Senegal, who has created something called Citizens Converging Toward Pan-Africanism. It's a continental-wide organization to start dealing with all these minor issues, minor problems, and try to resolve them so that when the heads of state meet in July, we have thought about all these kinds of issues, but people are thinking about them.
Let's take one more question, and then we'll move into relax setting next door for refreshments. Bob?
Well, thank you very much for a stimulating discussion from my class of business strategy students.
Thank you.
And you raised some very important strategic issues. First, when we talk about strategy, we talk about vision. And clearly this presents a vision as to where the continent of Africa needs to go. However, the aspect of how you choose a strategy is and looking at the conditions and the situations. I come from Jamaica, and we tried something like this back in, as you probably remember, in '62 with the Federation of the West Indies, which lasted 2 years before it broke up. However, the Europeans tried a different strategy in reaching to the existing European Union, which now has 25 members. It started just with a small number, 3 members initially in the European Coal and Steel Community, who combined for economic cooperation and then grew little by little. What strikes me as, clearly this is a very long-range project. I would suspect that it's going to take probably a bit longer than 20 years. But I wonder why there wasn't a decision or a strategy which started with the stronger nations economically cooperating. I would think probably South Africa and the nations that have oil in South Africa working together and then bringing in as their economies grow, much in the same way as the European Union grew, and gradually integrate from the basis of an economic union over a period of years to political integration. I think that by starting with the political integration as the initial step doesn't strike me as a very profitable approach.
You may be right. I don't know why. I think that there's also some urgency, at least in the way they have moved. There was some suggestion, at least actually, again, a suggestion that was made at Abuja about a year and a half ago, I think by the Libyan delegation, that there should be a coalition of the willing, and that the coalition of the willing might include just a few states, and you might pull other states in as they are capable or willing to do so. And that may be a good thing to do. I mean, I'm not sure what they will decide in July. They have decided already, however, that it has to happen. And Thabo Mbeki of South Africa says that if it doesn't happen within 20 years, we're in deep trouble in Africa. But we have to try to pull this off, because right now many countries on the continent do trade more with countries outside the continent than they do internal to the continent. I mean, why would you, if you live in Congo and someone lives in Zambia right next door, why would you in Congo trade more with the French or with the Belgians than you do with the Zambians? I mean, this is a problem. And it's only a problem because Zambia was controlled by the British, and one Congo was controlled by the French, and the other one's by Belgium. And so they look to France or look to Belgium, and Zambia looks to, used to look to Britain. So these are big problems. So I think that the coalition of the willing, starting with the nations that, not necessarily the big nations, because the big nations may not be willing yet. But I give you another story. Gaddafi says that Libya has 4 million people. There's 4 million people. He says, but we are a country, we have much more money than we can use. This is one country, one African country has more money than it can use. We would willingly give our money to create this union. The country of Gabon has the 4th highest per capita income. No, it's not per capita. It's the 4th highest gross of any nation. Of course, it's not adequately distributed, but because of their oil money. I mean, it's a small country, small population, makes a huge amount of money. So there are some Botswana is another. There are some countries that have great potential, but then there are also 14 nations in Africa that are landlocked. They have no outlet to the sea. So one way to solve that problem, again, is if you say with the United States of Africa, then everybody has an outlet to the sea. So there are many issues that can be resolved this way, but it's going to be hard.
Okay, I want to thank you very much, Dr.